start off by saying I probably can't cite the 10 Commandments off my head either. So for all of you who can do them, kudos to you. So like Melanie said, I met her in July, and we've been through quite a lot. So right now, I'll introduce myself. My name is Marina. I am a nursing student in 4th year. I'll be graduating in December. So almost a nurse, which is really exciting. I never thought I would make it to this point, so it's really something special to be able to come here and to talk about my experiences. And I think something that, I'll just put it out there now, that kind of strikes everyone is I'm very open about speaking with my struggles with anorexia. I'm very open, as Melanie said, sometimes today it's hard to attribute something to religion, to say God was my strength or God helped me along the way, because sometimes people aren't open to that. Or sometimes people will talk about being politically correct and they don't want you to talk about that aspect. So being able to bring that message out to people is really something I think that is hard to do, but definitely worth it, because God makes everything happen for a reason, I believe. So I'll just give a brief presentation. I think I have an hour, and I'll leave time in that hour for questions. I'm very open, so if you guys have any questions, whether it's the youth, whether it's adults, by all means ask away. There's nothing you can possibly ask that I'll shy away from, so go ahead. So this is a really good quote that I love. It's very true, and I like it because I'm such a word fanatic. Like, I think puns are amazing. So this is not exactly a pun, but it's nice. So only God can turn a mess into a message, a test into a testimony, a trial into a triumph, and a victim into a victory. And those are really touching words that we can all live by. Some of us, I know some people where I've shared my story come up to me after and they go, okay, so you almost had a near life-changing experience. You almost died. I haven't gone through that. I've never nearly died. I'm just a simple, normal person, maybe trying to finish high school, maybe trying to keep my job. Maybe I'm retired and I'm just trying to live the rest of my life. So what is there that God can possibly do in my life? How can He use me as a testimony? And really, God, He's so wonderful. He uses everyone in ways that we can never imagine. When I was a little girl, so I probably started having ideas of being fat when I was probably around 7 years old. And they spiraled out of control into what we now recognize was an eating disorder. So I'm going to share some of that with you, maybe give you a little bit of background about anorexia, about eating disorders and mental health, and then I'll bring in kind of how we can attribute this to God and how we can see God working through our challenges. So I love food puns, and this is to break the ice. Normally it's sticks and stones can break my bones. This is sticks and scones, like the food scones. I found it was really fun. I didn't make these up, by the way. I wish I did, but I didn't make them up. And this one, this is really pertinent. So I'll just give you a background and I'll tell you why the nacho thing relates. It's hard to talk about struggles that we go through. It really is. It's hard to talk about eating disorders. It's hard to talk about mental health issues, depression and anxiety, even just physical illnesses. No one likes to be vulnerable. We don't like to tell people about our weaknesses, about the difficult parts in our life, because we always, we want to feel good, and we want to look at people and feel that we're always strong. And sometimes it's a good thing, but at other times it's important to talk about it. Something that I learned from my experience with eating disorders and with, it is a mental health problem, is that it's hard to admit to someone that you have a problem like that. It's hard to admit that you're feeling down about yourself, that maybe you're feeling fat, you're feeling ugly, you're feeling useless, you're feeling worthless, you're feeling hopeless. So the way this relates to it is, they say, don't you want a taco about it? Because it's a taco. And he goes, I'm not your friend. You're so cute. So anyway, I never wanted to talk about my problems. I never wanted to talk about my eating disorder. When I was very ill. When I was ill, there was also, I would say, some aspects of depression, and I didn't want to talk about it either. And anyone who did want to talk to me about it was not my friend, because I didn't want to open about my experiences. I didn't want to get help. And what I soon realized when I got ill is that that was probably the biggest mistake I ever made, because had I sought help before, I probably wouldn't have gotten that bad. So as I said, I was ill for about 7 years, so about from the age of 7 years old. When I was in my first year of university, it got very, very bad. I had restricted most of my food intake. I was eating very, very little. So at the end of my first year of university, which was April, and it was 2 years ago, I had gotten down to 55 pounds at about this, well, not this height because I'm wearing heels, but a bit lower. Very, very sick, very ill. And I could no longer walk. I was having difficulty breathing. I was having difficulty getting to school, getting off my bed, walking up and down the stairs because I was so thin. And still very resistant to get help, very resistant to ask anyone, to tell anyone that I needed help. My heart always goes out to my parents because they were with me through all of this. This is my mom, and this is my dad, by the way.
Hi.
I'm on camera on the iPad. And they stuck with me through the entire thing. And when it got really bad, when I was down to 55 pounds, they told me, that's it, you have to go to the hospital, you're going to die soon. And even at that point, at being 55 pounds, I still refused, and I still would not go to the hospital. And they pretty much forced me to go there. And some people look at me and they go, how could you possibly be so wild? But that day, I was wild. I refused to go. I was yelling, I was kicking, I was screaming. I was a total mess because I knew that if I got into the hospital, I would get treatment. And for me, treatment didn't mean getting better. Treatment meant eating. Eating meant getting fat. Getting fat meant feeling ugly again. So you can see, definitely didn't want to go. But they pretty much forced me to go. So we went to the emergency room. And I remember the nurse she asked my dad, so why is your daughter in today? And I, kind of pushed him aside and go, I don't know why they brought me here today. I'm totally fine. And then my dad says, she's not eating and she won't eat anything and she's very thin. So the nurse says, okay, let's go weigh her. So she puts me on the scale and it obviously shows 55, it said 53 pounds. And she goes, oh my God. And I think within 2 minutes, we were admitted. And it's just kind of funny because, I was in nursing school at that time and people would always be like, I go to the emergency room and I wait for hours and hours. So when my parents took me that first day, I was thinking, this is going to take hours and I'm never going to get admitted. And I was admitted right then and there. And still I was like, okay, it's only going to take a couple of days. I'm going to, pretend my parents are totally delusional. I'm going to eat every meal in the hospital and show them that I'm totally fine, and then I'm going to get out. And I sincerely thought that was going to happen. And clearly, yet again, I was wrong. So we were admitted. I say we because my family never left my side. I was admitted to the hospital, and I still refused to eat. I told myself I would eat, but I couldn't. It was too hard. And this is probably something that I want to bring across to your attention about eating disorders. It's very easy for us to maybe take messages from the media or from whatever we hear about eating disorders and to say, well, why can't they just eat? And I'm telling you as someone who went through the eating disorder and got very ill, and I'm now recovered, thank God, is that you cannot just tell someone with an eating disorder to just eat. It's much more than that. It's an intense fear of gaining weight. It's a mental health problem. So to tell them to eat, like I said, means you're making them gain weight, you're making them get fat. And that's associated with so many negative connotations in their life that it just won't happen. So I didn't eat in the hospital. And so they put an NG tube in me. It's basically like a tube that they put in your nose to give you feeding because you don't want to eat. And I still thought, okay, it's only going to be a little bit and then I'm going to get better. And again, I was wrong. I woke up one day and I could not breathe. And what ended up happening is because I was so thin, my body started breaking down all my muscles to make energy for it, including that was the diaphragm, the muscle kind of in your abdomen that helps you breathe. So I could no longer breathe on my own. And I was sent to the ICU, the intensive care unit, immediately. And I was connected to life support, so a mechanical ventilator. Which basically is like this big tube that gets put down your throat, and it kind of does the breathing for you. It's kind of like an electrical machine that breathes for you because you can't breathe as well. Then a while after that, they found out that my kidneys were failing, and they were just totally shut down. So now I was diagnosed with kidney failure, and I needed dialysis. So basically what dialysis is it's like this big machine that connects to a part of your body. For me, it was the side of my neck. And what your kidneys do to your body is your kidneys take kind of like the dirty stuff in your blood, and they filter it and they eliminate it. So when your kidneys can't do that, you have kidney failure. So this dialysis machine takes the blood away from your body, cleans it, and then returns it back to your body. So now I was on life support on the mechanical ventilator, and now I was getting kidney dialysis 24/7. And it was too much for my body to handle at the moment, so they sedated me. So I was completely out for about a month, asleep. So I guess you can kind of call it a coma, because I don't remember what happened during that entire month. I was asleep during the entire month. The one time I can remember kind of being awake is when the sedating medication would wear off, and I would kind of open my eyes, but everything around me was pitch black. And I couldn't talk, obviously, because the tube was down my throat. And I remember all the time, when I would open my eyes, I would see my mom and dad by my side, and I would see the priests and everyone from my church community. And although I couldn't speak and I was very dizzy, I could hear them talking to me. And I remember every second of my experience in the ICU, I would, when I was awake anyway, I would think, God, like, why? Why? Why make me go through an eating disorder for 7 years? Why make me get so ill that I land in the emergency room? Then I need life support to breathe. Then I need dialysis for my kidneys. Like, what good could possibly come from all of this? Like, I'm in the ICU, my education's on hold, my life is on hold, nothing is happening the way I planned it to be, and I felt so down and so depressed. And I wanted to die. Every second I spent in the ICU, I just wanted it to be over. And I'm probably lucky that I couldn't have talked, because if I did, I probably would have asked them to take me off life support to just end it, because I was furious with everything. And I thought back to everything that I learned in church, everything that I learned as I was growing up. You know, we say, Jesus loves you, God loves you, He has a plan for you, He's doing everything He can for you. But at that moment, when I was in the ICU, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see, if someone this big and this powerful can love me so much, why would He possibly let all of this happen to me? And I always think and say, you know, we call God our Father, and how can a dad let something like this happen to one of his children? It didn't make sense. And I was wrong, because it slowly started to make sense. For a long time it didn't, but our time is not the way God's time works. You know, we want things to happen today. We want things to happen tomorrow. We don't see why something that's happening now can possibly have a benefit later. But the amazing thing is, He does. And we're not equipped with that. We can't see into the future. So we're thinking now in the moment. But He has bigger things planned for all of us. And that's what I came to see. Nice ringtone. That's what, you know, being in the ICU made me so aware of noises, because the ICU is full of loud rings and all of these stuff. So anyway, slowly and surely I got better. I didn't feel like I was getting better, but I know that everyone was praying for me. I remember one day when I the medication a little bit started to wear off, my mom came in and she told me, they're having a prayer meeting for you at church, you know, everyone's going to get together at church, we're all going to pray for you, and we really think that, you know, this is going to do it, this is going to push it through, and you're going to get better. And of course I couldn't talk, but in my head I was like, okay Mom, like, we've been saying this for a month, I've been in ICU for a month, I've been on life support, like, a prayer meeting is not going to change anything. And by this point, I'm sorry to say, I had zero faith. I really hoped that God would do something, but I didn't think He would, because it had gotten that bad. And I was wrong. A while after, so probably about a month and a half later, the doctors woke me up in the ICU. They kind of shook me, and they said, you know what, we've been monitoring your breathing, and we think we're going to take you off life support, and we're going to see how you do. And I was like, at this point, I was still kind of drugged from the medication. I was still a little bit like, I don't want to do this anymore. So I was like, okay, whatever, take the tube out. So they did. They took the breathing tube out of me. They stopped the kidney dialysis. And I could breathe on my own. And it was wonderful. I never thought that I would ever be able to breathe on my own again. I never thought that I would be, disconnected from a dialysis machine ever again, and here I was. And at that point, I was like, okay, God, so you took me off life support, but still, I'm going to live the rest of my life with an eating disorder. Everyone's going to know that I had an eating disorder. What good is going to come from this? I'm going to have to take a break from my nursing education, and I still doubted him. I still thought that this was all some kind of mistake, and he somehow had a plan for everyone except for me. And I was wrong, because things started to get better, probably not in the way that I wanted, but in the way that he wanted, which is always better, because we don't have that kind of insight. And that brings me to my next slide. So, faith, really. So, sorry, I'm kind of blind even though this is in front of me, so I'm going to squint really at a computer. But I put these pictures purposely because I really like them. But when I put them on the computer, I was right in front of the screen, so it was easier to read. So anyway, so starting with the left black one, this quote is really beautiful. So don't worry, God is never blind to your tears, never deaf to your prayers, and never silent to your pain. He sees and he will deliver you. And that's really true. I cried countless nights in the ICU. Even after I got better off life support, I cried and I cried, not knowing where life was going to take me. And I remember so many times like bawling my eyes out, sitting in like a puddle of my tears and saying, God, so you took me off life support, and here I am, and I'm able to breathe. So what? What good is going to come from this? And it was hard. It was hard being at that point in your life where you're just so frustrated with everything and not wanting to go on. And I say this, it's funny because I was on life support just praying to get off life support. And I did. And I still wasn't satisfied. I still wanted more. I still wanted to find out what good would come from this. And what ended up happening is I got off the ICU. I got transferred to a medical unit just to get stabilized there, so to make sure that I gained some weight. And then I was discharged home. And I was discharged home with absolutely no idea how to recover from an eating disorder. So at this point, I had gained some weight, but I didn't know how to eat. I didn't know how to do anything. And my parents had told me, you're not going back to school to nursing until you recover from this thing. And that made me so angry because nursing was everything I've ever wanted to do. So I told myself, I'm going to sit, I'm going to learn about eating disorders, I'm going to educate myself, and I'm going to eat. And it's going to be really hard, but I'm going to do it. And I did. And I'm probably making it sound a lot easier than it is because my mom and dad can probably attest to it that there were days when I was throwing plates of food on the floor, on the walls, I was kicking, I was screaming. I would get weighed and see the number go up on the scale and be horrified. But I kept praying. I prayed and I asked everyone around me to pray. And I remember so many people would say, you got out of life support, you're out of the ICU, glory be to God, so now you're good? And I was like, well, kind of, but I have to learn how to eat again. And this is always very funny in our culture, in every culture, because food is, it's food, right? If no one comes to an event, you say free food and boom, everyone's there, right? Or my mom and I go to Costco sometimes because they give free samples of food. You don't need anything from Costco, but it's free food, right? It's true, right? It is.
Only the ladies.
Well, the men can go to the brick and watch the game on the TV. So that's all I'm saying. It's a good thing. Or, you think about Thanksgiving or Christmas and you think food. So when you're here and you're telling someone, I have an eating disorder and I don't really know how to eat and I'm scared of eating, people are like, okay, so what happens if you just eat a burger? And there's I can't even tell you, if someone had told me to eat a burger the day I got out of the hospital, I probably would have okay, I don't want to say slap them in the face because we're in a church, but I wouldn't have been pleasant to them. It's really hard and it's really scary. And I'm trying to make light of the situation. That's just how I speak about it. It's hard to be, negative about it, but it was hard. It was hard to sit down and eat my meals. And I did it, but I didn't do it alone. I prayed so hard. And I remember going through the Bible and looking up any sort of Bible verse to encourage me along the way. And I remember the one that my parents would always quote to me is, do you not know that your body is the temple of Christ and that the Lord dwells in you? Amen. And I remember them telling me this, and I'd be like, okay, my body is the temple of Christ, I can have a skinny body and be the temple of Christ. And they were like, no, that's not what God means. God means you got to take care of your body. You have to nourish it. You have to make sure you're healthy. And it took a long time for me to finally understand that. And what started to kind of click is, yes, my body is the temple of Christ, skinny, fat, young, old, or whatnot. But God gave me this body, and I have to take care of it the way he gave it to me. You know, I can't mess this up. This is what he gave me. It belongs to him, and it's going to go back to him at the end. And I did. Slowly but surely I ate, and I gained weight, and I went back to school and continued to eat and continued to gain weight. And here I am, 2 years after, doing very well, thank God. Yes, amen. I'm very, very, very blessed. I would have never imagined that I would ever be here today, and I started a blog online just to kind of tell people about eating disorders, about my journey, about how Christ strengthened me. And you know, that it kind of turned into a big thing. I guess people were excited to hear someone talking about eating disorders. Not many people do. And I've always liked to write. And you know, I would tell my mom and dad, when I recover from this thing, I'm going to write a book. But what ended up happening is I just wrote a blog because, you know, it's free. And then I just didn't feel like it was enough. So I started to write just stuff like in a Microsoft Word document, like whatever, some thought, stuff that I wanted to write in a book one day. And when I finally had what I thought would be, I guess, good enough for a book, I submitted it to publishing companies. And I got so many rejections that I was like, God, like, you created me, I think, with a talent for writing, with a talent for speaking. You made me go through the eating disorder, and now everyone is rejecting my book. Like, why? Like, this sucks. And then one day, I submitted it to a publisher, and the publisher asked me, what makes your book different from all the other books out there about eating disorders? And I thought about it, and I said, well, I'm 21 years old. I'm a nursing student, and I have an eating disorder. So it's kind of a lot in one package. You know, nursing student, eating disorder, it doesn't really go together. 21 years old, and I've been through the ICU, and I'm out of the ICU, and I've recovered all on my own. It's kind of a big deal. But I also said, I kind of like to make light of the situation. So I like to use food puns, like you guys saw before. I talk a lot about my experiences. Like if there was throwing of food, it's there. If there was, you know, I had to go pray, it's in there. There's no such thing as politically correct or whatnot in my book because it's a personal thing, and that's what people need to read. They don't want to read research that they don't understand. They want something that they can connect to. And something about my experience, I think, is that anyone can relate to it, even if you don't have an eating disorder. Even if you have depression or anxiety, any type of mental health issue, even if you don't have a mental health issue at all, there's something that I think we can all relate to my experience because we all go through times where we're just fed up with everything and we're frustrated. Even like it could be anything. Maybe it's a hard test. Maybe it's peer pressure. Maybe it's not finding a job. Maybe it's a fight with a spouse, with children, with coworkers, with anyone. And you just reach this point in your life when you're like, if you are up there, can you do something? Because I'm waiting and I need you to do something now. And he doesn't respond all the time. And when he doesn't respond, we get really frustrated. And we're like, can you hear me? What's going on? Don't make me doubt you. And so many times I said that to God. I said, God, I know you're there. And there are so many people around me that are telling me that you're not there, that you're silent, that you're not answering my prayer. And I don't see you doing anything. So just please prove me wrong because I want to believe that you're there. And sometimes I didn't get what I thought was a response right away. But looking back now, God was there every step of the way. I just didn't see it. And it's really sweet. And I smile and I start to get tears at this point because I always say, I have such good faith, but I needed to work on my faith. And I think something that I learned from this is faith is not always what we think it is. Sometimes we think faith is, God, please, please, please do this. Tomorrow it happens. Glory be to God. But if it's God, please do this, and then a year happens, and nothing goes on. And then another year, and nothing goes on. And that's when our faith starts to get tested. And that's when God is really testing us and seeing, you know, is this faith? Do you really believe in me? Or is this kind of, pray to me, get what you want, and then thank me? And that's not the way God works. That's not even how my parents work. So, they're great. I love you. I have to be quiet because they're driving me back home. So, but it's true. So then this relates to this other verse. The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit. And it's true. God is close to all of us. But sometimes there's this nice quote, and it says, when life knocks you down on your knees, you're in the perfect position to pray. And it's true. Sometimes we don't notice the power of God in our life until we're knocked down to our lowest point. And then when we're at our lowest point, something happens and we see then, oh my gosh, I've been ignoring God the entire time, and now I need to ask him for help again because I forgot about him and I started to depend on myself. I started to depend on everything worldly and totally forgot about his power. And that's when you need to take a step back and say, God, have you guys heard the song, Jesus, Take the Wheel? You just have to say, take the wheel, because it's out of my hands, and I don't know what I'm doing, and I only know that you know what you're doing, so just do it. And that's what faith is. So, gosh, this verse is, I keep saying this, every verse is my favorite verse in the Bible. I love the Bible. Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. And it's true. It's really, really true. I always looked at this verse and said, okay, maybe God forgot about me when he wrote this verse. Because clearly I thought I was going through a lot of harm, and I thought, why is this happening to me? But, I forgot. Probably should have mentioned that the publisher ended up publishing my book, if you guys didn't guess. So there I was, 21 with a published book, and it's doing very well. It's selling a lot. I think people are improving from it. I get a lot of feedback on my blog or just from people emailing me or talking to me, telling me that it's helped them learn about eating disorders, it's helped them learn about mental health, about faith, about how to support someone, even if they're not going through an eating disorder, just how to be a more supportive person, how to realize that I can't do this on my own, and sometimes it's okay to say that I need help with something. And then it started to click, and I started to think, oh, so that's why. That's why I struggled with an eating disorder for so long. That's why it got so bad that I went to the ICU. That's why I was on life support. Because if I didn't struggle, if I didn't go to the ICU, would I have come out and wrote a book? No. Would I have been here giving this talk? No. I just would have been, I guess, struggling. God would have planned something different for me as well, but God has a plan for everyone. And like I said, I think this is cute. I was telling this to my mom the other day. I said, Mom, when does God start planning my life? Does he say, okay, my birthday is March 27th. Does he say, March 27th, Marina's going to be born, then 9 years later, she's going to have an eating disorder, then 10 years later, she's going to... How does it work? And I don't know how it works. No one knows how it works. All I know is that it does happen. And God has a plan for each of you, even before you're born. And there's a verse in the Bible that says, I've made you, you are the apple of my eye, you are in the palm of my hand. I knew you before you were made in your mother's womb. So that's amazing. God has a plan for every single one of you. For you and for me, for everyone. And sometimes we don't know why things are happening the way they are. And we're going through something in life and we don't see an end to it. Or we come to a decision and we don't know. Do we take A or B? Do we go to this school or this school? Do we listen to this friend or do we ignore this friend? Do we take this job or do we give up this promotion? And we're just so frustrated. And I think those are the times when we really need to step back and say, God, please just strengthen me. Strengthen me. Send something along the way to help me see what you have in store for me. And he never fails to provide an answer. He always does. Sometimes, though, we don't listen hard enough. Or we do what we want, not what he wants. And when we take things into our hands, it never goes the right way. Because we're not God. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. We don't know, what the future brings for any of us. But he does. And I think that's probably one of the most comforting things you can find in your church or in your faith community. The feeling of knowing, I don't know what's happening. You don't know what's happening, but he does. So let's come together and let's pray that he strengthens us and that he allows us to continue in what we're doing and that he shows us what we're meant to do. And everyone's life, I believe, is meant to be a testimony. You don't have to go through an eating disorder to be a testimony. You don't have to nearly die in the hospital to be a testimony or to be a message or to be a witness for Christ, because he lives in each of us. Even your actions show others God through you. Even the way you dress, the way you act, the way you speak, the way you treat your body, the way you treat others. It's all a testimony. And sometimes we don't want to think of that. We don't want to say, God is watching me, so I need to dress modestly. Or someone is going to look at me and say, that person's Christian, so I need to behave myself or whatnot. But it's true. And it's not like God is going to say, you were bad on January the 5th, so I'm going to make you get into a car accident. That's not the way God works. He doesn't punish us that way. But what he does do is he kind of does little things in our lives to remind us not to forget about him. Because sometimes when we forget about him, we think that we're in control. So sometimes it takes a little bit of God kind of interfering to wake us up and to remind us that it's still all about him. So, again, God, he's just amazing, and he really does have a plan for all of us. Sometimes, though, it really doesn't make sense. Most of the time. Okay, it almost never makes sense to me. But looking back now, I really do see it. And I encourage all of you to think about one hard experience you've had in your life, any hard experience, and look back on it. And maybe it wasn't the most pleasant experience, but I guarantee you, somewhere there, you're going to see why God made it happen. Even if it was a challenge, even if something bad came out of it, maybe you've grown, maybe you've become a stronger person, maybe it solidified your faith, maybe it made you meet someone who you never would have met before. Maybe it made you have a wake-up call to learn about something new. But everything in our lives happens for a reason, everything. And, even if you're young and you're in high school, even if you're older and you're working, if you're retired, it doesn't matter. From even before you were created in your mother's womb until even after you die, God has a plan for all of us. And we can't control that. That doesn't mean that we're hopeless and we're useless, but it means don't depend on yourself, because we can't. If I depended on myself, I would have never been here. And a lot of the times I thought that I could do it. I thought that, I'm going to eat, I'm going to write this book, everything is going to be peachy keen. And it never went the way I planned, because God always had something different for me. Sometimes I look back right now and I think, well, why didn't I just publish a book earlier? Or why couldn't it have been easier? Why couldn't I have published a book without going to the ICU? But now I think about it and I think, well, if I didn't go through all of that, my faith probably wouldn't have been strengthened the way it is now. I probably wouldn't have felt the power of God more in my life the way it is now. So looking back on it, really, and maybe this is my favorite verse. I don't know. But we know all things work together for the good for those who love God, and it's true. All things work together for good. Even if you don't think that it's good, even if you look back on your life and you think it's sucky and it's miserable, all things work together for the good. I think this is Romans 8:28. It's very easy to remember. Romans 8:28. All things work together for those who love God. They work together for the good. They don't just work together for no random reason. They work for the good for all of us. And it's easy to think about it. God is like a father. We say, our Father who art in heaven. We know God is our Father. No parent in the world would ever do something to hurt their child. And God is like the parent. He's like the big dad. Big daddy. He is going to take care of you all the time. And he's not going to let anything happen to you that's not going to happen for a reason. Whether that be something good, something that's challenging. He knows what's happening. He's in control. But you have to let him take control. And you don't just say, yeah, God, just do your thing and I'll be on the sidelines. No. You have to pray. You have to have faith. You have to make sure that you continue in what you're doing. And don't test him. I tested God a lot. I remember saying, okay, God, if you help me with my dinner today, and tomorrow I wake up and my weight doesn't go up, I'm going to know that this happened for a reason. And I would wake up the next morning and my weight would be up and I would get so frustrated and I would say, God, this is not working for me. And that was wrong, because I can't test God that way. It's not like that. I can't say, God, if you do X for me, I'm going to do Y. Or if you do this for me, I'm going to believe in you. That's not the way God works. It's like saying, to my mom, Mom, if you buy me a chocolate bar today, I won't go and drive your car to like Hawaii or whatever. I don't even know if you can drive Hawaii. It's just an example. It doesn't work that way. Parents aren't like that. Neither is God. He needs you to believe in him. And it's okay to ask for, we're supposed to ask God for things, but it's not okay to be demanding and to demand things in our own time, because we don't know when the right time is. And it reminds me of the Bible story. I'm sure you're all familiar with the wedding of Cana at Galilee, right? Are you guys familiar with that story? Yes. So the wine finishes at the wedding, and St. Mary says they have no wine. And in that time, having no wine at the wedding was like a conspiracy. Like it was a big thing. And she goes like, you have to do something. And what does Jesus say? You guys remember? Yeah, he goes, my time is not here. So St. Mary doesn't go, I'm your mom, you got to get this thing going or else. She says, okay, whatever he says, do. And if we can live by that, what Mary did, God really does fulfill, and he really sees, and he really does deliver. This slide I put up here because this is probably the biggest lesson that I learned in my experiences. If you're going through tribulations, you pray. If you're going through hardships, you pray. If you're going through good times, you still pray. You pray, 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 pray. It's not enough to pray when you're struggling and then once something good happens to say, thank you, Jesus, I'm done. See you next year when I go bankrupt at Christmas time. But you kind of wish it was that way, right? Because then God is like your personal genie. And I know that sounds really abrupt. But sometimes, I personally do that sometimes. I ask God to be close to me when I need something. But then at other times, I kind of forget about him because life is good and everything is great. And then something hits me and I go, oh, when was the last time I came to church? When was the last time I prayed? When was the last time I thanked God for something? Going through the eating disorder made me realize that every day when I open up my eyes, I have to be thankful that I can breathe. And I never, but see, everyone says that, right? Everyone says, be thankful that you can see. Be thankful that you can eat. And it's like, of course, it's nice to thank God for your five senses. But until I did lose my ability to breathe, I never thought about it. And now every day, when I open up my eyes, it's always on my bed. The first thing I do is I take a deep breath on my bed, and it clicks, and I go, thank you, God, that I can breathe. Thank you, for making this chest rise and go down again, because I know that means that I can breathe. And when I can talk now, I couldn't talk a long time in the ICU when the tube was in my throat. I say, thank you, Jesus, for letting me be able to talk. I was taking care of a patient the other day in the hospital, and she lost her sense of taste and smell when she was a little kid. And right now she's probably in her 60s, so she's been living without an ability to taste anything she eats or to smell anything for maybe about 50 years. And I thought about her as I was helping her eat her lunch, and she was saying, it's so hard. It's so hard looking at this food and eating it and not knowing, is this chocolate? Is this a burger? And she doesn't know, obviously, that I've struggled with an eating disorder. But I went home and I told my mom and dad this, and I said, I never thought I would ever say this, but I'm so happy I can taste what I'm eating, because this poor lady can't. And this is coming from someone who had an eating disorder, this is huge. But I'm so thankful. I'm thankful that when I'm eating that burger, I can taste it. I'm thankful that when I'm smelling my flowers, I can smell them. And these are all things that we take for granted. We never realize. So sometimes it doesn't have to be a life-changing miracle. It doesn't have to be that you nearly died and God resurrected you. Sometimes it could just be that I can still see today, that I can still walk, that I can still breathe. Those are still miracles, but we don't think about them that way because we take them for granted. There's stuff that we're just so accustomed to. But sometimes when you see someone who doesn't have that and you really reflect on it, you realize how blessed we really are. That doesn't mean that you're never going to have challenges. We're always going to have challenges. Always. But it's part of it's part of our ministry on earth. If everything was always good, there's a verse that says, if we never went through a challenge, how would we know that God is there? How would we know that he's the creator, that he's the healer, that he's the comforter if we never cried? We wouldn't. So something else I really encourage you to do is to think of anything in your life and to thank God for it. And the more you do that, the more you're going to feel happier. The other day, I was just having a really miserable day, and I was just, everything was, it's too much pressure from school, sick patients, been on my feet, and I complained to my mom and dad, and I said, this is horrible, my life sucks, I have no idea why this is happening to me. And they were like, but you recovered from an eating disorder, and God raised you up from the ICU. And I said, so what? I'm busy right now, and this sucks. Do you see how easy it is to forget about it? It's so easy to forget. Because in hindsight is 2020, right? You look back, but I don't care about what happened before. I care about now. But then they started saying, well, what about this? What about this? And at the moment, I was really angry. But now that I think about it, you guys are right. I'm healthy, and I can see, and I can smell, and I can walk, and I'm in school. Even if money is tight, even if I don't have the latest iPhone 6 or 6 Plus, which is going out September 19th. Mom and Dad. Did you see how I did that? Even if I don't have the latest Uggs, which are the style, they're like these cute little boots that all the girls are wearing. Even if I don't have the nicest hair, even if I don't have the highest paying job, I still have a lot. And God is still with me. And it's not always the materialistic things. Actually, sometimes it's not the materialistic things at all. Something my mom always tells me when I'm going through a hard time is she goes, even if we lived in a tiny shack with no food and no water, and we had nothing, but we had each other, I would still thank God. And I'm like, Mom, if I don't have my phone, and I don't have my clothes, and my pretty boots, and my hair straightener, and all this stuff, I could never be happy. But when I think about it, she's totally right. Yeah. Because if I'm breathing, and I'm alive, and I'm surrounded by good people, and I have God, then I need nothing else. So really, everything else around me is kind of like a privilege. It's kind of like a blessing that God, for why? Because He loves me. He loves me, and that's why He gave me all of this. He loves you, and that's why He gave you all this. Even something like this church, there are so many people who don't have a church. So many people who wish that they could come to church, but they can't because they're persecuted. They can't proclaim their faith because they're hurt because of it. They can't, they can't tell people, I believe in Jesus, because then bad things happen to them. Let alone even come to a church. That's way beyond even what they could do. They can't have a Bible. They can't wear a cross. They can't do any of the stuff. Even something like this is a blessing. When you start to count your blessings, you will feel happier. And you will thank God because you will realize, even if I'm not 100% content, I'm still in a good state. And there's a verse by St. Paul in the Bible. He says, St. Paul was afflicted. He had almost like we don't really know exactly what it is. I'm just going to call it like something stuck in his skin for a very long time. And he says in the Bible, I prayed on countless occasions for God to remove this illness from me, and He didn't. And right after that he says, but I thank God upon every remembrance, because in my weakness I am made strong. Or Christ says, in your weakness there comes my strength. And it's true. In our weakness, God's strength always shows. Not in our strengths, because when it's our strengths, we take credit for it. In our weakness, God shows us that He's there. When it is our strength, we have to remember to bring it back to God and say, God, I'm good at public speaking. This is because of you, because it's helping me help others. God, I'm smart in school. It's because of you. God, I look fine. It's because of you. All of this stuff, it's because of God. And it's for Him. If you relate it back to Him and you count your blessings, I really believe you do live longer. It makes me feel happier when I'm able to, breathe. So imagine how much more you would feel if you literally start to count your blessings way more than you can imagine. I started keeping a thank you journal. It doesn't really work, but it does work for sure every Thanksgiving. And I add to it every year. If I could do it every day, I would, but I don't do it. But on Thanksgiving, I made a promise to myself that I would start to keep it. So every year I flip back in the book and I read what I've written. Just a little note, I'm thankful for this, I'm thankful for this. And I remember looking back, I did this a long time ago, when I was 4. And I said, thank you for my Barbie doll. And I read it the other day, and I'm like, who would thank God for a Barbie doll? Like, what is this doing in life? It's a Barbie doll. But at the age of 4, I guess it clicked to me that not everyone had a Barbie doll. And we weren't very well off when I was 4 years old. So having a Barbie doll, it was the only thing I ever had. And I still have that doll now, and I'm never going to let go of it. Because I remember my mom and dad worked so hard to get it for me, and it was the only toy I ever grew up with. But now looking back on it, I'm like, that was God. That was God trying to comfort a little child. And even now, I'm thankful for so many things. So if you can, Start a thank you journal, or even write on your smartphone what you're thankful for. If you don't want to write it, at the end of the day before you go to sleep or when you wake up, thank God, even just for one thing every day. Even if it seems something minuscule, I guarantee you're going to feel like 50 times better. These two verses, one of them is in the start of my book, so I'll start with the one on the left. Wow, this one, okay, maybe this is my favorite verse. This is from Isaiah. But those who hope in the Lord shall renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Wow, you just have to hope on the Lord. You just have to pray and have faith in God. And look at this, soar like eagles. Do you notice the comparison to your eagles? Like eagles are like the top-notch bird. They're the scary, strong ones. You're going to soar like eagles on wings. You will run. You won't be afraid. You'll renew your strength. Just because if you hope in the Lord and you pray, that's it. That's all he asks. He's not asking for you to give up everything for him. He's just asking for you to put him as number one in your life. The one on the left is the introduction to my book. And I chose this verse when I was writing the introduction to my book because I think it's a summary of life. My life, your life, everyone's life. And not only that, but we also glory in tribulations, knowing that tribulation produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope. And it's true. So we don't just take tribulations and go, oh, here we go. We glory in them. We glory in them because every tribulation produces perseverance. And the perseverance to carry on in life produces our character. And in the end, character produces hope. And hope starts the cycle all over again and prepares us for the next tribulation. But it makes us stronger each time. And in that whole entire process, it strengthens our faith. And then our strength is renewed and we're able to soar on eagle wings. And that feeling is a marvelous feeling because when you feel under the protection of God, you know that nothing can hurt you. Yes, I mean, you're still invincible. You know, if you get hurt physically, you might get hurt. That's not what it means. It means that whatever comes your way, you know that God is watching over you. And you know that God is taking care of you. And he's not going to leave you ever to be alone. And through that entire process, when you feel that comfort inside of you and you're able to really attest to God in your life, everything changes. When I focus on my challenges, even until now, I still don't feel strong. But when I focus on the good side, like on what God has helped me with or on what my blessings are, it changes everything. So I really urge you to do that. No matter how old you are or what you're going through, try to focus on the good in your life or to look back on an experience and see how God somehow worked through that experience. I guarantee it. You're going to see how it produced your character, how it gave you perseverance, and how it gave you hope. So that's the end of my presentation. I hope you guys learned something. I hope you enjoyed it. I didn't focus too much on the eating disorders. If there's any questions you guys have about eating disorders, I'm more than happy to answer them. If there's any questions you guys have about anything, about mental health, about food, about religion, I'm more than welcome to it. So go ahead, the floor is yours. Don't be embarrassed. If you don't, I'll have to sing a song. So. No, I'm just kidding. I don't sing. Yes.
Thank you for sharing. Appreciate your honesty and your humor as well. That's a helpful tool when you're sharing something especially as serious as this. Quick question, because I read a good CBC article on you.
Oh,
and
flatter me.
you mentioned in there, or it was mentioned about you, that you at one point did check into a group-oriented treatment session, but after a short while you checked yourself out. And you did mention that there was a bit of competition amongst some of the participants there who had gained the most weight. I guess kind of the opposite of weight loss groups where folks are trying to cut down. And so did you find that helpful, the group dynamic, or was it better for you to, did you find that you go it alone a little more with the support of your parents and the Lord, or did the group thing help at all? Was that something that if we encountered someone that we should try to refer them or convince them, if we could, to get them involved in a group dynamic?
So this is, it's a really good question, and it's a question I get a lot. I did go into, after I got discharged, I was put on a waiting list for an eating disorder program, and I got accepted into it after a while. For sure, they helped us with meal support, which means they fed us the meals, they made sure that the meals stayed in. The competition was, one girl would say, I only gained 2 pounds a week. How many pounds did you gain? And I'd be like, I gained 5. And then I would feel so miserable that I gained the most weight. That kind of conversation was not supposed to be present. We were, the healthcare providers there were supposed to kind of make sure that that kind of stuff didn't happen. But I mean, you can't, right? I mean, people are going to whisper, people are going to write, it happens. For any person who has any type of illness, I do not advocate staying away from medical treatment. And that comes from the nursing aspect of it too. When it comes to a point where you need medical attention, by all means seek medical attention. If I had not gone to that eating disorder program inpatient, I probably wouldn't have gained as much weight as I did. When I signed myself out of treatment, I had gained most of my weight and was allowed even to be permitted to continue the treatment at home. If they were more supportive in that facility of my family and of my kind of way of doing things, I would have stayed regardless of the competition. At that facility, they were not supportive of really our family dynamics. They weren't really open to my family visiting me all the time. They kind of gave me ideas to abandon everything and just do it alone, and that wasn't working for me. Not every place is like that. I will tell you, my dad, who's a family physician, is not the kind of doctor who would do that at all. I, as a nurse, am not the kind of nurse who would do that at all. There are always people who do things differently. But in any time where there is a mental health issue or a medical health issue, nurses and doctors and all the good healthcare providers are there for a reason, and they're there because they're there to serve you. So by all means, seek medical attention. What you need to do as a patient is you need to be informed. You need to make sure that your healthcare providers are working with you, not for you. You need to make sure that you're advocating for yourself. If something's not going the way you like it, or if maybe your family physician or your nurse is telling you something and you don't understand, you have to take the time and say, slow down, I didn't understand that. Can you please repeat it to me? Because if you don't do that, I'm telling you now, as a nurse on 12 hours on my feet, I'm always go, 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 go. And I try to explain to people all the medications they're taking. Sometimes there are a lot of patients who don't know what medication they're taking. They just say it's the blue one. There are a lot of blue pills out there. If you're not careful, something bad is going to happen. But it's true. So I encourage you, and I'm telling you this, there are going to be a lot of nurses and doctors who don't like that you're asking them questions. Don't be the annoying kind of patient who says, are you sure you're giving me the right medication? Don't do that. But inform yourself. Know you're right as a patient. It's to get the best treatment out there, and it's to be informed and ask questions. Because they have so many patients in their head that if you are not informed and you don't kind of step up and be a game player in your care plan, nothing is going to work for you. And that's something that I learned from my experience. I was letting them do all the work, and I wasn't taking initiative myself. Now I realize that by taking initiative, I probably would have stayed in the treatment program even longer, and probably would have been able to keep up with the pace of things. So does that help answer your questions? Yeah.
I've heard of many people who ended up with eating disorder because they're trying not to gain weight because they don't want to, look, TV tell them you gotta be a certain way to be accepted in society, etc. In your case, how did you end up with the disorder? Just an illness, or you didn't want to be the fat girl?
Yeah, it's a good question. When I was young, I was always on the chubbier side. I was teased all my life for being chubby. I remember one experience, I always say this experience, when I was in grade 8, I had the biggest crush on this boy. I don't know why, because looking back now, he was nothing special. But I mean, it is what it is, right? And I mean, this, right? When you have a crush on a guy, sometimes you look back on him and you're like, what was I thinking? But anyway, when you're a teen, you're like, oh, does he like me? Does he like me? No, you're in that stage. And then I asked my friend, can you ask this guy if he likes me back? So the guy responded and he said, I could never like Marina because she has fat thighs. And that experience took everything from me. I remember hearing that and feeling so miserable about myself, feeling if he doesn't like me because of my thighs, I need to get rid of these thighs. And that's when I started the diet. And then I lost some weight. And now we know eating disorders, like you said, they're caused by peer pressure. They're caused by the desire to be thin. There might be some sort of genetic or biological component. For me, I lost some weight and I started to see the thighs go down. And then I thought, well, heck, if I can lose 5, why not lose 10? So I started restricting more. And then after 10, I said, let's lose 20. And by then, that's when the eating disorder took hold. And it was no longer, let's just lose to be healthy. It was lose because I was out of control. Does that help answer it?
Yeah.
So parents, watch your kids, whether it be girls or boys, because boys can get eating disorders too. Just because we see, pretty models on the TV, guys can get eating disorders, maybe the desire to be thin, the desire to be muscular, to use anabolic steroids or whatever it is. So you need to, if there's something going on with your kid, regardless of how old they are, you need to be upfront and you need to ask and you need to make sure that they're healthy and that they're eating well and that they're safe, they're not under the influence of drugs or alcohol. It's a very hard world that kids are growing up in today. It's very, very difficult. Like, I'm 21 and I'm saying this because I went through a lot, and I went through a lot of peer pressure, and if you don't solidify that support at home and in the faith community, it's very difficult, not because the kid is bad, but because they're just bombarded with so many messages. They need that strength around them to feel comfortable. And teens and kids want to test limits. If you tell them there is no drinking in this house and all of their friends are out drinking, even if they don't want to, it might happen. So you need to help them explain, no, we don't drink because alcohol does this and this and this, and this is not the way we treat our bodies. We eat not because we just want to be gluttonous, but because we need to sustain our bodies and enjoy, and so on. When you have open dialogue with your kids, they're less likely to go behind your back and do something, versus if you just tell them, don't do this, like, have you guys seen the memes, like, ain't nobody got time for that. It's true, but you have to have time to explain to them. Yeah.
Yeah, you went through a terrific ordeal, and I'm just wondering, do you feel that you would be where you are today if you hadn't gone through it? Could you come to the faith that you had another way, or is this the way God needed to lead you, just because of who you are?
I don't think so. I don't think I would have been here today if I hadn't struggled that way. What made me write the book, and as this gentleman mentioned, like, I've been featured in the Mississauga News on CBC Hamilton online. Just last week I was on the CBC News at, I think it was 6 p.m. and 11 p.m. Nobody would have published a story about some random girl with an eating disorder. But what made this story different is that she's in nursing, she was so young, she was in the ICU, she had organ failure, she recovered on her own at home, and now she's got a book. So looking back now, everything happened for a reason. I wouldn't be here today if I hadn't gone to the ICU and was on life support. That's the beauty of it, right? No, it's true. I always tell people the eating disorder was the best and worst thing that ever happened to me. It was the worst thing because it was the hardest thing I've ever gone through and will go through in my entire life. But it's the best thing because, not even for me, the book is not for my fame. And I always tell my mom and dad this, I never wrote this book so that I could get money off of it. I never wrote this book so that people would know, oh, Marina Apramad. I wrote it because I wanted to make a difference. And I wanted to help people understand how to treat eating disorders, how to treat mental health, how to glorify God, how to address these issues. So every time someone buys a book, it's not, yay, extra cash. It's, God, just use this to touch someone else.
How did you manage to keep this under wraps? Your father is a physician as well, is that correct? Yeah, how did you manage to keep that under wraps? It's something that,
I'm a smart girl.
what weight did you start at? And, you say it's important for us to keep an eye on our children. At the same time, how? You had a perfect scenario here where your father is a physician and he didn't really see the warning signs until it was almost too late.
I think he, at the beginning he probably didn't know because, again, like I said, with an eating disorder, you don't want to get treatment. So obviously, I'm wearing, nice clothes today, but back in the days when I was really ill, I wouldn't be wearing clothes with my figure like this. I probably would have wearing something really baggy so that you couldn't see what was underneath it. If there were situations where we would have meals, I would say, I already ate, or no, I'm not hungry, or something like that. And these are all warning signs that absolutely my father and my mother should have picked up on. However, my dad is a general family physician. He is not a physician specialized in eating disorders. And in nursing, I can see now that the education on eating disorders is minimal. As a nursing student, I have not been, until now, exposed to eating disorders in all 4 years of nursing whatsoever. No education on it. How are healthcare professionals going to recognize these signs if we're not educating them? So that's something I'm trying to work on through the book and through advocacy, is to help people understand. But my hope now is that through this presentation, through my book, through the blog, people will be more educated. They'll know if someone's always denying a meal, that's a warning sign. If someone is never present for meals, that's a warning sign. If someone looks like they're always in baggy clothes and they don't kind of seem right, if you're questioning them about food, that's a warning sign. So I'm sure now, my parents now are great, they're fully educated. Sometimes they come to me and be like, you need to go talk to that girl, I think there's a problem. And they're right 100% of the time. So now they know, but they weren't educated before, and that's not their fault. Are you guys very familiar with eating disorders, honestly? No, no one really is. We're all familiar with diabetes. We're all familiar with, heart disease and cholesterol. We're not familiar with depression and anxiety and eating disorders. Why? Because mental health is not easy to talk about. It's easy to say, you have heart failure, take a diuretic, the water pill. It's easy to say, you're overweight, lose some weight. It's difficult to say, I have depression, I need to talk about it. I have anxiety, I'm scared. I have an eating disorder, I don't want to eat. It's harder to say that because it's a more vulnerable position. But hopefully, we're trying to change things. I can't do it alone, my family can't do it alone, but this is where, we reach out to people like you, and we reach out to everyone we can, and we try to raise awareness. Does that help? Does anyone else have any questions? No? Well, thank you. Thank you so much for letting me come and talk to you. I hope it was a good, fun experience, maybe even a few laughs. Some Bible verses that hopefully you guys will remember. Pick up your Bible and take a read in it. Go to my blog if you're interested. I brought some copies of my book if you'd like to purchase a copy. Educate yourself and make yourselves aware, and remember that God is number one. Thank you so much, everyone. This is great.